When we get into this space of authentic communication, we're going to find peace in the midst of the turmoil and start to let go of having to have our influence on everything we hear or say and open ourselves up to perhaps learn other people's perspective. So, when we get into this place of authentic communication, I want to start right here by focusing on um, what this practice is all about and how we should move ourselves through it in a peaceful, positive, honest way. So it all starts by focusing on being authentic, by understanding that we need to start from that place of authenticity. And to define that, I need to talk about that at the beginning to say what authenticity is from my perspective as we focus on who we are at our very core. Beyond all the noise and all the distractions and all the identifications that we put on ourselves, we understand that deep inside of us, there's a part of us that's not defined by our job or the role that we play in society or in our family or the function that we feel is our purpose. Deep inside, there's an authentic part of ourselves. And it's a unique gift that combines all of our talents, all of our skills, all of our insights and wisdom and interests and abilities and gifts. All those things come together to create who we are. And it's the us, the you, that is your strength, is your values, our own moral code that's uniquely ours and needs expression. Because deep inside of each and every one of us, we know right from wrong and good from bad. We don't need any person, any book, any professor, any pastor, anybody to tell us what's right or wrong. We know at our core right from wrong. And it's not the you that we're programmed to believe we are. That's what we're trying to get past. It's not the you that we expect ourselves to be. It's who we've been our whole entire life. Who we should have been our whole entire life. And it's the you that thrives in those times that we are the happiest and we feel the most fulfilled. And when we start connecting the dots between those things, it shows us who we truly are. But it starts to get there, we have to start discovering how are we communicating with ourselves? What are we telling ourselves each and every day? What do we look at when we look at ourselves in the mirror? What are we saying? How we speak to ourselves at our core. We need to turn off in order to connect to our true selves because we become so addicted or so focused on what the external world is telling us. Even our friends and family who are have these expectations about who we should be, or the media who has all these concepts of what we should look like or believe or think or choose. We need to turn off sometimes and just sit in reflection. That's what meditation does. And it means we need to focus on what we're feeding ourselves. Not putting in our mouth and eating, but what are we listening to? What are we watching? What are we reading? What are we taking in spiritually? And how are we receiving that information? The truth is to find our core. We need to understand it's not what we say out of our mouth that determines our life. It's what we whisper to ourselves each and every moment that has the most power. What are we telling ourselves each and every day? And that's where communication begins, with ourselves. In our practice of meditation and mindfulness, we understand it is a self-centered practice. So start to communicate with ourselves. And then from there, we can rise up and figure out how we're communicating with the world. We have to begin by coming home to ourselves and listening and understanding that to truly find the power and truth as we move forward in our life and to build a true path to transformation, we need to say to ourselves that we are our best friend and understand that deep down in our core, that's what our truth, our authenticity, has been waiting to hear, to say, I am here, and understand that this is where it begins. Understanding that home is inside of us, our true home, and it's been waiting for us to just be ourselves, deep down inside, to accept the situation no matter how messy our life has been, understand that each and every person is messy in their own way and has their own stuff. But when we get back to that core, we start to breathe deep inside and we start to tidy things up, to make things right, to offer forgiveness or kindness or compassion to ourselves. Those things that a lot of us are very good at giving to others, but we are not so good at giving to ourselves. So we come home to ourselves, and it all begins by being present with ourselves and truly seeing deep down inside what drives us, what inspires us, what motivates us and brings us a deep, profound, peaceful joy in understanding that at our core, happiness is possible when we start communicating with ourselves with the right language. It starts right here, searching within for the answers, understanding that the answers aren't always outside of us. Now, it's great to learn new lessons and discover new things, but once we receive that information, we need to skip back down into our core and listen to make sure it truly resonates with us. Because it might sound like a great concept or a beautiful idea, but if it doesn't echo through our heart, and if it doesn't connect to our soul, then perhaps it's not for us. Perhaps that message wasn't for us. And that's okay. So, that's important to remember. We need to get in touch with our emotions instead of resisting our emotions. And we cover that in so many ways, in so many different workshops and lessons and teachings, talking about emotion, emotional agility, emotional intelligence. However you want to talk about it, you get into that place where we get in touch with our emotions and recognize that our emotions are a part of us. They don't define us. They aren't everything about us, but they're signs. They're kind of like a roadmap, but they're not directives. So when we get into a space where we see what our emotions are, we let them come up and then determine what we're going to do with it, if anything. So we need to get in touch with them instead of resisting them and truly acknowledge our feelings. That's what insight meditation's all about. And then to react authentically, if necessary, and mindfully breathe and focus and find a way to resolve whatever's going on with ourselves. We have to communicate with ourselves. So authentic communication means that we get into that place and understand that we don't have to have all the answers. What a, what a weird world it would be if we already had the answer to everything, to every question, or we already knew the outcome of each and every day. That wouldn't be, where would the excitement be? We don't always have to respond to everything. And what a beautiful concept that is if people would start grasping that and saying, I don't have to respond to each and every person I don't agree with. I don't have to put my opinion on each and everything that comes my way. I can just let it go. And if our communication isn't geared to a positive resolution, then why are we bothering? Why get caught up in something that is not going to have an outcome that's positive, that's going to transform or help us grow or make life better? In our practice, everything we teach is the practice of mindfulness, but take out the mind and recognize it truly is a practice of heartfulness, where we're getting down into that mind that we carry in our heart, the heartfulness that we really teach, and acknowledging our feelings, just as I said before, accepting our truth. This is who I am. Right now, this is who I am. That doesn't mean I'm stuck here. That doesn't mean I can't change, but accept the truth of where you are in your life so that you can figure out what you're going to do with that information or what you're going to do next. It starts right here by focusing and understanding that sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to be all these different things. We fill our life with all these beliefs that are limiting, but we have this amazing tool that we can use to create space for something positive. I like to think about it as like we're releasing the air. When we breathe and we focus and we acknowledge and we learn from it, we can let go and we open some space and we continue to breathe. So think about something that pushes our buttons and causes us to respond from a place of anger. So we get angry about something. And as we let that anger build up inside of us, it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it starts to take up space. So I like to teach it like it's a red helium balloon in our brain. And so that red helium balloon keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The more we focus on how this person did this thing or how this thing that makes me angry, it just takes up space. Takes up space. But if we recognize it and we breathe through it and we acknowledge that it's there and we find a way to learn from it, guess what? It starts to get smaller. As we start to let go of the anger and discover where it came from or what set it off, it starts to get smaller, and we start to open up some space. That doesn't mean it's always going to go all the way away. It's just going to get smaller. And in that space, we find other ways to get around it. Or what am I going to do with this information? Or how am I going to protect myself from that thing that made me angry? We're giving that space. And that's the key to our practice. That's the key to how we're communicating with ourselves. So when I'm communicating with myself from that place of anger, the anger keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. But when I get into that place where I recognize and I accept that it's there and I learn from it and I figure out how I'm going to let it go or not be identified by it or not let it take up so much space, that's communicating with ourselves. That's what this is all about, authentically. So here we are talking about ourselves and understanding. We have to recognize, what are we feeding our soul? We all know these people in our lives who are bombarded with information. Maybe they're connected to a certain, I don't know. We know people who watch the news all the time, right? They get home at the end of the day, or they're retired, and they watch the news 24/7, right? We all know these people. So they're being bombarded by these messages and these messages over and over again. And most of those messages aren't positive. They're focused on division and separation. That's where our media is now. Our media is in that space where it's developed to divide. And you can find your lane. And I get in my lane, and that's the station I watch. That's the media that I follow. This is the people who are on my friends list on social media. These are the people I follow. So you fall into that lane. And everything around you is supporting that lane, right? So you keep feeding yourself that information, filled with that negative information about fear or division, right? And the truth is that somebody's making money off of that, or somebody's getting power from it. Well, we can take ourselves back and say, okay, it's good to be informed, but I don't need all this information. I don't need to be so bombarded with information to reinforce my beliefs. Maybe that's not just it, but understanding, if I surround myself by people who are always talking from a negative perspective, then I'm going to fall into that negative space. If I'm not finding some balance, if I'm not taking some time, we need to understand that everything we take in, through our eyes, through our ears, is spiritual food. So I found this video, and I really like how it kind of puts that in perspective in a kind of a fun way. So, everybody with me? Thumbs up. Good. And you can hear that, right?
Did you eat something today? How about some spiritual food? We are used to pay attention to our physical needs most of the time. We are hungry, so we eat. Thirsty, so we drink. Sick, so we go to the doctor. For some reason, when it comes to our emotional and spiritual needs, we are clueless and don't exactly know what to do. We may feel that something is not okay, but many times we repress our emotions and neglect our inner needs. Our priorities go wrong. We are too caught up in the outer world, the routine, daily troubles, commitments, and we forget about our inner world. So what is spiritual food? And I'm not talking about religion, even though this is a kind of spiritual food for many people. We are fed by anything that happens around us. It can be close or far away, but as long as it crosses our consciousness, we eat it. Whether we like it or not, our environment does affect us. But stay optimistic. We still have the choice what to take, what to pay attention to, and choose our attitude as well. You choose what kind of spiritual food to eat every day. There is unhealthy food. Every time you open the news, all of the negativity starts flowing and get to you. I'm not saying that you should stay disconnected, even though I'm sure you'll hear about the main issues from other people, but control the amounts. Unless you're a politician or someone who works with news, there is no need for you to stay updated with every single detail of negative stories that happen in the world. More types of unhealthy food are gossiping, fighting, being unkind to other people, or not being authentic. All of those drain us and implement negativity inside us. We can't avoid them completely. It's a part of being human, but pay more attention to your choices and reactions. There is also the junk food type of spiritual food, and it's watching television, scrolling through social media, and any activity you do to kill time. Just like real junk food, it's okay to enjoy it sometimes, but if you eat too much of it, you hurt your health. Have you heard of the term emotional eating? It's exactly what it is. Sometimes we try to feel an emptiness or relieve emotional pain by eating junk food, physically or spiritually. When our soul is satisfied and we feel fulfilled, the need for external substitutes disappears. The last type is healthy food. It can be anything that makes us feel good, but also gives us benefits for the long term, like mental strength, fulfillment, and inner peace. The tools I personally use are meditating, writing a gratitude journal, reading positive articles, reading personal development books, and watching videos that help me improve or motivate me. It can also be honest and deep conversations, sharing emotions, walking in nature, being mindful and present in the moment, or even hobbies. If you have more examples of healthy spiritual food, feel free to share it with me in the comments. Now, I want to talk about the importance of spiritual food. 1. The way we feed our soul is assimilated into us and affect our lives. It is necessary to feed our soul with healthy spiritual food in order to live a satisfying life of true joy and fulfillment. 2. It makes us better people. When we feel good inside, we shine. Everybody feels the good energy we bring. We become more pleasant to be around. 3. It brings good things to our life. Everything flows more easily. We look at the bright side and embrace things to our life with love. 4. It makes us stronger mentally. Suddenly we feel so whole and complete. We don't need to rely on outside feedback anymore. So in this video we'll learn that there are 3 types of spiritual food: negative food, junk food, and healthy food. We also learned about the importance of eating spiritual food. It makes us healthier, makes us better people, brings good things to our lives, and makes us stronger mentally. In the description you can see a list of books that I find very helpful, so you can eat them as well. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe for more healthy spiritual food. See you next time!
Ah, so that can show us that um, as we move through our life, we should find some balance, right? There's nothing wrong with watching. I mean, say if you're watching television, right? And when you're coaching people to get into a space to find some balance, one of the good, great questions we can ask them is, what do you watch every day? What do you watch on TV at night, right? And if all they say is they watch violent shows or they watch, I don't know, um, reality shows or whatever, and they have nothing to balance it out with, it's like, okay, all of a sudden they're feeding themselves this negativity. So there's nothing wrong with doing some, watching an action adventure or watching a reality show, but as long as you balance it with something else, that's where we want to find that balance. So that whole focus on spiritual food gets into the whole concept of mindful eating, which most of you haven't taken that workshop yet, but it's coming up in 2 weeks. My spiritual eating and mindful eating are the same. It's what are we taking in, and what is that doing to us? It either nurtures us, or it deprives us, or defeats us, or deletes us, or whatever, depletes us. So we want to understand what we're taking in as the first part of communication. The second thing is to get into this space where we want to be present with life as it is and understanding that sometimes we expect so many things from ourselves and from our life and from everything that one of the greatest things we can do is to find this opportunity to pause. And that's what we are doing in meditation, is pausing and understanding that sometimes it's okay to just be in the moment. Sometimes it's okay to just say, this moment is enough. In this moment, there's plenty of time. In this moment, we're precisely as we should be. And in this moment, there are infinite possibilities. It all starts with the mindset by focusing on letting some of the pressure off, not having to be all things to all people all the time. We need to understand that at this point in our life, it's a poignant time. And it's easy to feel that we all feel like we need to be doing more. We need to be doing more to make the world a better place or get people to believe a certain thing, or we just want to save the world, right? And that voice that we carry inside of us and the voice that we tell ourselves over and over again is that sometimes this isn't enough. We need to do more. We need to do more and do more and do more. and it becomes seductive. From not enough political activism to not enough exercise to not enough time to not enough whatever. But to truly be authentic and to stay positive, we need to listen to the other voice that says, actually, it is enough. Actually, I am enough at this moment. At this moment, wherever you are, standing in front of a group, talking to your spouse, sitting by yourself, it's enough. This is enough. The truth is we all feel those moments of fear where we feel the direction of the world is going in the wrong the world is going on the wrong direction. Of course we feel that. And of course we all feel that the world is a bit more troubled than we wish it to be. And we wish we could do more things to fix it. But when we get into that space, we become depleted. We get so focused on doing things that we're not even doing the right thing, right? We all see people who put these outrageous comments on social media. They get caught up in these conversations that aren't going to do anything, except for maybe just a moment. It makes that person feel better because they've voiced their opinion. But is it really going to make a difference? So, we need to get into this place where we can say it's enough. To come into this day and give ourselves permission to say, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't have to be the savior of the world, but I'm going to come into this day with a willingness to understand that, yes, I have some messy things in my life, but I'm someone who cares about the world that we live in, and I'm not here to save it. I can come into this day and this culture where everyone has to have all the answers and that things need to be fixed right now, saying, I don't have all the answers. I can't fix everything. So today we should explore this concept of enough and telling myself that I am enough, to reflect on the thought that I don't have all the answers and I have some limitations, and to really tell ourselves that each and every day can be liberating. It can help us find our path forward to put all that stuff in perspective and to carry that information in our heart to understand that I am enough, that I don't have to have all the answers. And that doesn't make me less important than anyone else. It's authentic, and that's powerful, and it's truly liberating. And that's what I focus on telling myself each and every day, that what I'm doing today is enough. And that's mindful communication. I'm telling myself that. So there's the beginning of it, focusing on yourself. And then the second part of mindful communication is getting into the space of how am I listening? There's an art to listening. There's a practice of listening. And as we discuss the part where we're going to focus on right now is this listening, is there is such a beautiful thing when we take a space to truly listen, to let go of the need to control what's being heard so that we can open ourselves up to the purity of being present with the information that we're receiving. The truth is we can't see or understand the other person if we're trying to control what they're saying or trying to force our perspective on what they're saying. We need to listen. But to listen, we need to give the other person some space so that they can unfold and so that they can tell their story or their opinion to be who they are. Then we can determine what we're going to do with that information from a place of knowing, without having to have all the answers, without having to put our opinion on that other person. One of the things that Tara Brach talks about is this whole concept of getting to know a tree, right? And isn't it true that to truly know the beauty and majesty of a tree, you have to be quiet and rest in the shade of that tree, or lean against it, or touch it? Don't you need to stand there under that tree? To understand anyone, we need to stand underneath them for a little while. Not physically, but just be there with them. It means that we have to listen to them and be quiet so we can take in who they are as if we're listening to them from deep down inside, getting to know that person at their core and understanding that there is something inside of them that we need to know if we're listening without having to put our opinion on it. It's this whole process of compassionate and deep listening. So again, everybody with me? You heard the person talking in that last video, right? Okay, good. I just want to, sometimes the sound doesn't come through. So this is a really great discussion between Oprah Winfrey and this is Thich Nhat Hanh. If you've never heard him speak, he speaks very softly and he has a heavy accent, so there's some subtitles, I believe. So here we go.
you refer to, I can't remember which book, but you talk about deep listening also.
Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose: help him or her to empty his heart. And if you remember that you are helping him or her to suffer less, and then even if he say things full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable to continue to listen with compassion. Because you know that listening like that, with compassion, you give him or her a chance to suffer less. If you want to help him or her to correct his perception, and then you wait for another time, but for this, the time being, you just listen with compassion and help him or her to suffer less. And 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing.
So I love this idea of deep listening, because oftentimes when someone comes to you and they want to really vent, they want to purge whatever is going on inside them, people start talking and giving advice. So if you allow the person just to let whatever those feelings are to come out, and then at another time come back to them with your advice or your comments, you would experience a deeper healing. That's what you're saying.
Yes, the fear, the anger, and the despair is born on the ground of wrong perception. And we have wrong perceptions concerning ourselves and the other person. And that is the foundation for conflict and war and violence.
You've said that the only way we can begin to end war is due to communication between people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to say like this: dear friends, dear people, I know that you suffer a lot. I have not understood enough of your difficulties and suffering. It's not our intention to make you suffer more. It is the opposite. So please tell us about your suffering, your difficulties. I'm eager to learn, to understand. It has to start like that, loving speech. And if we are honest, if we are true, they will open their heart and tell us. And then we practice compassionate, deep listening. And during the process of deep listening, we can learn so much about our own perception and their perceptions. Mm-hmm. And that is the best way, the only way to remove terrorism.
Terrorism, or even difficulties between yourself and
yes.
family members or friends.
Yes.
And the principle is the same no matter the conflict.
Yes.
Terrorists, anti-terrorists,
yes.
father and son,
right.
Yourself and your boss,
right.
Yourself and your children, your best friend.
Yes.
So we get into this practice of mindful listening, and I understand you can call it mindful listening or conscious listening, or I just think it's presence, right? When we're getting in that space where we're offering the person we're with a bit of presence, to truly be with whomever we're with, not just to receive the information, but to fully listen to them. Not just to hear the words, but to understand that sometimes the words have an intention behind them. That if we're truly listening, we can understand it. And in our practice of mindfulness and meditation, we start to develop this deeper intuition where we can hear from our heart rather than from our ego, and truly listen so that we can understand that person's perspective. And there are 5 steps that we can coach people to, or coach ourselves to say, how do we do this? First, we have to focus on the person talking, to be present. Because how many times when we're listening to somebody speak, do all of a sudden we kind of already assume what they're going to say and we start thinking of something else, somebody else or something else that's going on? We need to focus on being present and understand if we get distracted, we need to push ourselves to come back, to listen. We can sit across from somebody, and if we're saying something deep down inside, we know if they're present or not. So if that other person doesn't feel like we're present, isn't that disrespectful? And why are we even have that conversation anyway? The second step is relinquish the need to be in control. It's a difficult one for a lot of us. When we feel like we're right, we stand in that indignation that I am right. And whatever you tell me isn't going to change me, isn't going to change my mind. But that's not what it's about. What it truly is about, it's not about changing your perception or perspective. It's about changing your perspective about the person you're listening to so that you can understand where they're coming from. So we listen and relinquish the need to be in control and welcome what comes up with an open mind. Instead of being so rigid and already having the canned response, we open ourselves up and welcome what's coming with an open mind and hold our tongue and wait our turn. It's a difficult one for a lot of people. We need to interject. We need to put our opinion in there in the midst of somebody else speaking. But we should wait our turn and listen with the intention to learn something, to learn about the other person, to perhaps learn a different perspective, to perhaps just listen to learn about your response. And one of the best ways to do that is to focus and take a breath every now and then. Take a breath before we respond. Take a pause. That other person might not understand why you're holding your tongue for just a moment, but just think about how that changes. When somebody says something to you that might push your buttons and ask and want you to respond a certain way, when you take response, when you take a pause, you're taking the control back. Because there are people who try to push our buttons and want us to respond angrily or from a place of emotion. But as soon as we take that breath, it gives us our power back. It gives us that strength so that we respond, if we choose to, from the heart rather than from the emotion or from the ego. One of the great tools that we find that we should practice is that before we speak, let our words pass through three gates. And they can come in any order that you choose. But the first one is it true? Oops, sorry. If it's not true, then why talk about it? Why say the words? So that's almost an easy one, but not everybody follows that one, right? The second one is it necessary? That's a biggie, because a lot of us get caught up in these conversations and we say something that's not necessary. If it's not necessary, then just hold it in. Just don't let it out. And the last one is it kind? And is it kind can get a little wonky sometimes because kind doesn't always mean nice, right? Sometimes it's kind to tell somebody the honest truth about something, right? So if you're running a company and you have somebody in a position who isn't fulfilling their job, or they're bringing the rest of the team down, or they're causing stress or anxiety in the workplace, isn't it kind to let them say, I'm going to let you go be successful somewhere else because this position isn't working for you? So that's kind. Isn't it kind to tell somebody something that truly is um, hurting somebody else? So kindness isn't always nicety. But anyway, so we focus on those three gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And more than likely, if you follow those three things, your conversation is going to be much better. The four basics of mindful communication is timing, knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to pause, and to be aware that there's space in the communication. And sometimes that space is as important as the words. It's like a beautiful piece of music. Sometimes the space between the notes can be the most profound part in that song, in that symphony, or whatever it is. So those spaces between the words can be very important. And if we're truly paying attention, we can understand that some people's language can tell you more about them than actually the words that they're saying. So if they're talking really fast, that means they're nervous. If they're talking really slow, then perhaps they're being more thoughtful and mindful. Listening. Most people use the time when the other person's speaking to think about what they're going to say. We should pause and give the other person our full attention. Because isn't it true that when you're trying to get your point across, as you're explaining yourself or you're talking about your perspective or perception or whatever it is, most of the time the emphasis or the point is at the end of the sentence. So if we already made up our mind how we're going to respond, then we're not listening to what the point is. So we need to pause. Drop the agenda. We should be curious. I think one of the most amazing things that happens as you start digging deeper and deeper into this practice of mindfulness, as we start to awaken that inner voice within, is one of them is to get back to that curiosity. The curiosity that we see in a child, right? When a kid has not all the wrong perceptions or all the expectations or all the judgments of the world piled on them, after a while they stop asking questions, right? But what if you could get back to that place of pure, innocent curiosity where you ask why? Why? Kids ask it all the time. Why is the sky blue? Why is the cow black and white? Why is this? Why is that? Until there's a point where people say, stop asking so many questions. And it just shuts down that curiosity. So we want to get back into that space where we awaken ourselves to the curiosity. In the morning when we're watching the sunrise, ask ourselves, why are those colors coming up in the sky? Or whatever it is. It's a beautiful journey when we open ourselves up. And then focus on feeling confident. And that's another great practice, a great thing that happens as we become more and more mindful. We become confident in who we are. And when we're listening to somebody who's confident, we pay attention more. So if we feel our own inner confidence and our own inner strength, then we can listen with that confidence, knowing that whatever that person is throwing at us, it's not going to hurt us unless we allow it to. It's not going to push our buttons unless we allow it to. And when we speak from that place of confidence, people truly will listen. You can feel it resonating in the voice of the person you're listening to. So, and then the last part about the listening is to listen with a bit of empathy, understanding that sometimes we try to put the wrong thing into what's being said. Thich Nhat Hanh says this phrase, this thing here. Think about it from this perspective. When you plant lettuce, if it doesn't grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons why it's not doing well. It might need fertilizer or water or some more sun, but you never will go back and blame the lettuce. But if we have problems with our friends or family, we blame that other person. But if we know how to take care of them, we know they'll grow, just like the lettuce. Perhaps there's something else we need to do. Blaming has no positive effect at all, nor does trying to persuade using reason or argument. No blame, no reasoning, no argument, just understanding. If you understand and you show that you understand, you can love, and with that love you're fertilizing or you're nurturing or you're watering or you're providing more light, and the situation will change. Maybe it's just simply seeing that person and just thinking to yourself or saying it out loud, I see you, I hear you, I understand. Whew. Doesn't mean you agree, just understand. It comes with that connection with empathy. And we have to provide a bit of self-empathy too and give ourselves back to that place. It's empathy is when we get into that place where we see with the eyes of the other, we listen with the ears of another, and we can feel with the heart of another. We can feel what they're feeling. We can understand what their perception is or their perspective is. Again, doesn't mean we agree with it. We just connect to it. And it's just such a better way to move through our life. As we get into this practice more and more, there's a whole write-up in your binder in, I think it's Module 6. Module 6. It's about nonviolent communication. And when I say nonviolent communication, we have to understand what violent communication is first. Violent means we're acting in ways that result in harm or hurt to another person. Even if it's not intentional, sometimes it just comes from that place of blaming another, offending another, discriminating, speaking without listening, criticizing others or ourselves, or calling names, or reacting with anger, or using some political rhetoric, or being defensive, or judging somebody's actions or words as good or bad, or determining what's right or wrong with people. That's all violent communication. If we're constantly telling people no, or we're trying to correct people all the time, it's violent. That's not positive. It's not going to lead to any resolution. But in our practice of mindfulness and meditation, we start to connect with our true natural state, focusing our attention on our heart and putting our words and our actions through those filters of truth, necessity, and kindness. And when we do that, we'll move through our life more positively. So there's a whole write-up on nonviolent communication in your binder. I'm not going to go into it today because it's pretty in-depth. And then if you get a chance, the gentleman who wrote this whole concept of nonviolent communication, his name's Marshall Rosenberg. And there are some videos, and I had the pleasure of sitting in one of his talks once. And he goes out and he does these big corporate events, so these big companies hire them for their conventions or their team building exercises or whatever. And I was sitting in one of those. This is back in my previous life. And it's very interesting when he starts talking about this. And if you ever watch one of his videos, he pulls out some puppets. And I was sitting there in this group of people, and he pulls out this giraffe puppet, and the other puppet I think was an elephant. And he just starts doing his discussion on nonviolent communication with these puppets. And at first everybody's like uncomfortable with that because here's this grown man doing a puppet show in front of us. But he got the point across. And by the time it was finished, he got a standing ovation because people truly got it. So if you get a chance, look at some of his videos, and Marshall Rosenberg. But so nonviolent communication is the integration of four things. Consciousness. It's a set of principles that support living a life of compassion, collaboration, courage, and authenticity. Going back to what I talked about at the beginning, being authentic, being you, and getting yourself into that space where if you're acting from a place of authenticity, people can either take you or leave you. This is you. Just be you. Language. Understanding how words contribute to connection or distance. The words that we say each and every moment have a profound effect on whether people will trust you, whether they'll want to listen to you, whether they'll resonate with you or not. Everything we say. Knowing how to ask for what we want and how to hear others even when we disagree with them, and how to move towards solutions that will work for all. There's always a middle ground. We seem to be stuck in this space of division, but at some point people have to come together so that we can find solutions to make things work. And it means sharing power with others rather than always having to have power over others. Nonviolent communication is the language of compassion, and it's a positive tool for social or any change, and such a positive tool that we can use as coaches and teachers when we're working with others, when we're working with people who are perhaps you having a couple come in who's having trouble in their relationship, or a parent and a child, or people in a group, or whatever it is in a team of business people. Using this practice can really be a great positive way to change. And it truly is a spiritual practice. Not a spiritual practice that's based on the Bible or any other written text. It's a spiritual practice where we connect to the core. And his quote is, "Look beyond the naked eye and you'll see the beauty of one's soul and the true essence of who they really are. I see you. I see you." One of the greatest things that I was taught was to, when I'm sitting across from somebody or standing in a room, hearing somebody that I disagree with, you say, "I see you, my teacher," and understand that we're going to learn something from that person. So, shifting gears a little bit, we're going to jump into this video that's kind of fun, talking about how we can speak so that people want to listen to what we have to say. Because when you move forward in this practice, when you start to find your voice more and more, you have such a passion for it that you want to share it, but you need to understand how to get people to want to listen. And this is a good video on that.
The human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or say, "I love you." And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world. What I'd like to suggest, there are a number of habits that we need to move away from. I've assembled for your pleasure here 7 deadly sins of speaking. I'm not pretending this is an exhaustive list, but these 7, I think, are pretty large. Habits that we can all fall into. First, gossip. Speaking ill of somebody who's not present. Not a nice habit, and we know perfectly well the person gossiping 5 minutes later will be gossiping about us. Second, judging. We know people who are like this in conversation, and it's very hard to listen to somebody if you know that you're being judged and found wanting at the same time. Third, negativity. You can fall into this. My mother, in the last years of her life, became very, very negative, and it's hard to listen. I remember one day I said to her, "It's October the 1st today," and she said, "I know, isn't it dreadful?" It's hard to listen when somebody's that negative. And another form of negativity, complaining. Well, this is the national art of the UK. It's our national sport. We complain about the weather, about sport, about politics, about everything. But actually complaining is viral misery. It's not spreading sunshine and lightness in the world. Excuses. We've all met this guy. Maybe we've all been this guy. Some people have a blame thrower. They just pass it on to everybody else and don't take responsibility for their actions. And again, hard to listen to somebody who's being like that. Penultimate, the 6th of the 7, embroidery, exaggeration. It demeans our language, actually, sometimes. For example, if I see something that really is awesome, what do I call it? And then, of course, this exaggeration becomes lying, out and out lying, and we don't want to listen to people we know are lying to us. And finally, dogmatism. The confusion of facts with opinions. When those two things get conflated, you're listening into the wind. You know, somebody is bombarding you with their opinions as if they were true. It's difficult to listen to that. So here they are, 7 deadly sins of speaking. These are things I think we need to avoid. But is there a positive way to think about this? Yes, there is. I'd like to suggest that there are 4 really powerful cornerstones, foundations, that we can stand on if we want our speech to be powerful and to make change in the world. Fortunately, these things spell a word. The word is hail, and it has a great definition as well. I'm not talking about the stuff that falls from the sky and hits you on the head. I'm talking about this definition, to greet or acclaim enthusiastically, which is, I think, how our words will be received if we stand on these 4 things. So what do they stand for? See if you can guess. The H, honesty, of course. Being true in what you say, being straight and clear. The A is authenticity, just being yourself. A friend of mine described it as standing in your own truth, which I think is a lovely way to put it. The I is integrity, being your word, actually doing what you say, and being somebody people can trust. And the L is love. I don't mean romantic love, but I do mean wishing people well. For 2 reasons. First of all, I think absolute honesty may not be what we want. I mean, my goodness, you look ugly this morning. Perhaps that's not necessary. Tempered with love, of course, honesty is a great thing. But also, if you're really wishing somebody well, it's very hard to judge them at the same time. I'm not even sure you can do those 2 things simultaneously. So hail. Also, now that's what you say, and it's like the old song, it is what you say, it's also the way that you say it. You have an amazing toolbox. This instrument is incredible, and yet this is a toolbox that very few people have ever opened. I'd like to have a little rummage in there with you now, and just pull a few tools out that you might like to take away and play with, which will increase the power of your speaking. Register, for example. Now, falsetto register may not be very useful most of the time, but there's a register in between. I'm not going to get very technical about this for any of you who are voice coaches. You can locate your voice, however. So if I talk up here in my nose, you can hear the difference. If I go down here in my throat, which is where most of us speak from most of the time, but if you want weight, you need to go down here to the chest. You hear the difference? We vote for politicians with lower voices. It's true. Because we associate depth with power and with authority. That's register. And we have timbre. It's the way your voice feels. Again, the research shows that we prefer voices which are rich, smooth, warm, like hot chocolate. Well, if that's not you, That's not the end of the world, because you can train. Go get a voice coach. And there are amazing things you can do with breathing, with posture, and with exercises to improve the timbre of your voice. Then prosody. I love prosody. This is the sing-song, the meta-language that we use in order to impart meaning. It's route one for meaning in conversation. People who speak all on one note are really quite hard to listen to if they don't have any prosody at all. That's where the word monotonic comes from, or monotonous, monotone. Also, we have repetitive prosody now coming in, where every sentence ends as if it were a question, when it's actually not a question, it's a statement. And if you repeat that one over and over, it's actually restricting your ability to communicate through prosody, which I think is a shame. So let's try and break that habit. Pace. I can get very, very excited by saying something really, really quickly, or I can slow right down to emphasize. And at the end of that, of course, is our old friend, silence. There's nothing wrong with a bit of silence in a talk, is there? We don't have to fill it with ums and ahs. It can be very powerful. Of course, pitch often goes along with pace to indicate arousal, but you can do it just with pitch. Where did you leave my keys? Where did you leave my keys? It's a slightly different meaning in those two deliveries. And finally, volume. I can get really excited by using volume, sorry about that if I startled anybody, or I can have you really pay attention by getting very quiet. Some people broadcast the whole time. Try not to do that. That's called sodcasting. Imposing your sound on people around you carelessly and inconsiderately. Not nice. Of course, where this all comes into play most of all is when you've got something really important to do. It might be standing on a stage like this and giving a talk to people. It might be proposing marriage, asking for a raise, a wedding speech, whatever it is. If it's really important, you owe it to yourself to look at this toolbox and the engine that it's going to work on. And no engine works well without being warmed up. Warm up your voice. Actually, let me show you how to do that. Would you all like to stand up for a moment? I'm going to show you the 6 vocal warm-up exercises that I do before every talk I ever do. Anytime you're going to talk to anybody important, do these. First, arms up. Deep breath in and sigh out. Like that. One more time. Very good. Now we're going to warm up our lips, and we're going to go bop, 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 bop. Very good. And now, just like when you were a kid. Now your lips should be coming alive. We're going to do the tongue next with exaggerated la, 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 la. Beautiful. You're getting really good at this. And then roll an R. That's like champagne for the tongue. Finally, and if I can only do one, the pros call this the siren. It's really good. It starts with wee and goes to or. The wee is high, the or is low. So you go wee, or wee. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Take a seat. Thank you. Next time you speak, do those in advance. Now, let me just put this in context to close. This is a serious point here. This is where we are now, right? We speak not very well into people who simply aren't listening in an environment that's all about noise and bad acoustics. I have talked about that on this stage in different phases. What would the world be like if we were speaking powerfully to people who are listening consciously in environments which were actually fit for purpose? Or to make that a bit larger, what would the world be like if we were creating sound consciously and consuming sound consciously and designing all our environments consciously for sound? That would be a world that does sound beautiful, and one where understanding would be the norm. And that is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
So, kind of fun. Yeah, I don't do all those exercises before I do a meditation, but some of them I do. As we move forward in in our training and our practicing, when you start recording meditations or you record coaching sessions or whatever, there's some coaching I do to help you get into that place where you really connect with so many of those things. The first one is pace. When you're leading a meditation, pace is very important, but there's also a practice of changing the structure of the voice that you're putting out there. I have done it through the years. I've changed where I speak from, and when I'm leading a meditation, I think I go even a little deeper. But I think I used to, for my when I listen to recordings I have from many years ago, I believe I was speaking more from my nasal, and eventually I switched down to my throat, and I believe I speak more from in my chest. And my voice is a little bit deeper and richer. I mean, it's a great meditative voice. And that came through practice. I didn't always speak like that. And we all have that ability to shift the focus of how we speak, especially when we start to change the tone and the pace and the structure and the space, like hot chocolate. We'll get there. It's a practice. But the seven poor communicator things that we work on as coaches is to understand that if you gossip, that's bad, right? These are poor communication things: judgment, negativity, complaining, excuses, dishonesty, and dogmatism. And dogmatism's a big one for me because as I teach meditation through the years, people keep coming to me and talking about Buddhism. And there's so much in Buddhism that really I believe is dogmatism. There are rules that are made up by somebody that you have to do certain things a certain way. We don't teach from that perspective. We let people do it from that place. And mindful thinking, when we talk about it from the way that he said, the hail that he said there is to greet people enthusiastically. H is honesty, be straightforward. A is authenticity. Again, we talk about this all the way since the beginning. Be yourself, standing in your truth. Integrity, be your word and honor it. And love, wishing people well, coming from that place of the heart is what it's all about. One of the phrases I like to coach people to is to get back into that space where we say it's okay. It's okay to say I don't know. I think when we're kids, people tell us not to say I don't know because we used to use it as an excuse. We go, I don't know. I don't know. But as an adult, why don't we use that word more? Because if we truly don't know, that's okay. We should wear that as a badge of honor. We should be able to say, I don't know. It's difficult because we've trained ourselves not to. But when we say it, and it's coming from a place of truth, it can be an unparalleled source of power because we're opening ourselves up to say, I don't know, and maybe we'll listen to somebody who might know. And it can be a declaration of independence from that pressure of having to have an opinion about every single subject. Why do I have to know about something that doesn't affect my life? It takes me back to my childhood when I was a kid, and my dad and my grandfather used to drive all over together, and my dad loved talking politics. He loved talking religion. He loved talking about everything, nonstop talk. My grandfather most of the time just sat there and just, most of the time I think he was half asleep. But sometimes he would just say, I don't know. And it would used to make my dad so angry. I'd hear him, it's like, well, how can you say you don't know? And he just like, one time he just said, if it doesn't have an effect on my family or on my job or myself, then why do I get involved in it? He used to hate talking politics because like, I don't need to know that stuff. I have a job, I have a house, I have a family I love. That's fine. So now I see it, and it's like he wore that like a badge of honor. I don't know. You're sitting over here blabbering, and I'm just being myself. So anyway, we let go of the drive to have it all figured out because we don't have it all figured out. And if we truly don't know, we can proclaim the only truth that we can truly be sure of. I don't know. So we can empty our mind and lift our heart and say it proudly. I don't know. Don't be ashamed. Open yourself up and say, as we align ourselves with the great mystery of life, we don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm present in what's happening today, and that's okay. That's what our practice is really all about. So we went from self-communication, where we talk about how we're speaking to ourselves deep down inside. We talked about mindful listening, where we're going to take a step back and create some space between the words that are being said so that we can hear and seek to understand. And understand that the words that we say have true impact on so many different things. And so we want to put the words that we say through those three filters. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And if you do that, you'll be very successful. And the last piece I want to talk about today is journaling. And I talk about it with you guys often and often about how we get into this space of journaling. And it's a great tool, a great thing that we can share with our clients, with others, of how journaling can open up some expression, can help us communicate with ourselves in different ways. So there's different types of journaling, and I'll talk about a few of them here, but there's many more, and you'll do some research on them. But the first one is mindful journaling. Mindful journaling is the practice of getting into that space. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's getting into that space where we're writing mindfully. Journaling can really help deepen our practice, can help find a way to connect ourselves even more to our meditations. So if it's a meditation journal, what I coach people to do is at the end of the meditation, sit down and write about your experience. What came up? What did you feel? Or maybe it was some colors, or maybe it was some energy, or maybe it was a discomfort. And it can just really extend that meditation. Because so many times, especially us as teachers, as coaches, when we're leading meditations, we get to the end of the meditation and we go about being busy. And so many people do that. They get through with the meditation, say, okay, I'm done with that. And then all of a sudden they get back in their car, or they get back in their busy life, and they're right back where they started. But if you sit and meditate and journal at the end of a meditation, it makes it more deep. It makes it more real. It extends that meditation, because anytime you write something down, it kind of plants it deeper into your mind, so it can make your meditations even deeper. And the other great thing about meditation journaling is you can go back and look back. And if you go back just a couple of weeks, you can see the transformation that's occurred. And if you go back a long time, you can truly see a transformation occur. So, so in that space, when we're getting into the space of mindful writing, we want to express ourselves mindfully. What are we feeling? What are we experiencing? What are we thinking? We don't necessarily have to close our eyes like we're in a meditation, because it's hard to write with your eyes closed, right? But we can get into that space where we're getting it out mindfully, getting it out of our head, putting it into paper. Sometimes it can be so useful. It allows us, gives us time to confront our thoughts, to explore our curiosities, to face our feelings, and to sit in reflection. That once we put it down, it's like, huh. Because when we read it, it has a different concept. Instead of just bouncing around in our mind, we get to see it and do it from that way. So when we're getting into this place of journaling or writing, there's a few key concepts that we need to focus on. Is first, put it on paper. It's not so... I've had people argue with me on this, not argue, but just tell me differently, that they prefer putting it into their devices. But there's a beauty when you write things out. There's a connection when you put something on paper, when you express yourself through writing. So it's more organic. But some people aren't into that, so whatever works. The other thing is to always write the date. Put the date on whatever it is you're journaling. Because first off, it makes you present. And secondly, it gives you something to know when you go back and read it again, if you do. The other thing is to reflect on what you're writing. And the one thing I think a lot of people struggle with is being authentic and just have full disclosure. There's a fear. It might not be as apparent to all of us, but there's a fear that what if somebody picks up my journal and reads it? What are they going to think about me? That could be limiting. It could get you into a space where you're not going to be so expressive. And then make space as you're writing for new ideas, for things to come out, and just keep practicing. It's like everything we do, the more we do it, the deeper it goes. But the benefits can be truly healing. The other thing is that it really connects us with our emotions. And anytime we connect with our emotions that way and see them and express them and get them out, it makes us more intelligent about our emotions. And emotional intelligence is such a big piece of what mindfulness is all about. Knowing that we are emotional beings. It can help us achieve our goals. It helps us focus more on what really is important and what matters more. It really does help us improve our memory, because when we write it down, it plants it deeper in our mind. It improves our vocabulary and our writing, because with practice you get better at it. It makes you smarter. I'm not quite sure why that one's there. It strengthens your self-confidence, and it also increases your creativity. So, those are the 7. Here are the 7 tips. Put it on paper, just as I said. Always write the date. Reflect. Once you put something down, reflect on it. Let yourself get into that space of full disclosure. Just get it out. Making some space to let things come out, and keep practicing. And understand it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of us are perfectionists. We want to make sure every T is crossed and I is dotted and the punctuation is perfect. But this is your journal. Just keep writing. Just keep going with it. And then the other thing is, if as coaches, if we're going to try to get our clients to do it, we should truly listen, because it doesn't have to be done. It's just a tool that can be useful. But not everybody does it. Not everybody relates to it. Nobody ever connects to it. And I have a client I had a couple weeks ago, and I convinced her to start journaling. And then in our next private session, I asked her how was the journaling going for it, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I was so frustrated because I kept putting things on in my journal of what I wanted to do or accomplish that day, and I wouldn't get it done. So then the next day I do it again, and I couldn't get it done." And I was like, "You're not keeping a journal. You're writing a to-do list, and if it's not going to be helpful for you, don't do it." It was just another chore in a stress-filled life because she came to me to help reduce stress, and by doing a journal, it just added more stress. I didn't want to come back and say, "Well, you're doing it wrong." We'll revisit that later, but for now, I gave her a break and said, "Let's leave the journaling behind for now. It's not the space that you want to be in." Another great practice is gratitude journaling. If we're working with with clients who are stressed or who are struggling to find meaning and purpose in their life or whatever it is, a gratitude journal can be one of the greatest things that we can teach them to use. Gratitude journaling can be something that can be done any time of the day, but I encourage people to do it either in the morning or in the evening or both. So uh, when a client opens their eyes, I say, instead of reaching for your device or turning on the TV and watching the news or getting caught up in the busyness of your day, take a few moments and just write down something that you're grateful for. Something or some things. What am I grateful for today? And if you do it at the end of the day, you can say, what was I grateful for today? And you bookend your day with gratitude. Boy, that's a great way to start and finish. Or some people carry their gratitude journal with them and they can pull it out whenever something pops into their head. But it can really be great if we can convince a client or ourselves to create a ritual or habit of it and say, this is the time I write gratitude every day. And to truly express gratitude and celebrate those moments where it's quality, not quantity, but quality. Paying attention to even the simple things. When you start writing things like, oh my gosh, I'm grateful for the way there was a flower on the sidewalk that I didn't notice yesterday. So it can be a really great thing. I'm grateful for my breath. Noticing those things that pop in as you start to practice it. Gratitude journaling. But not everybody's into journaling. But another great gratitude exercise that we can use for our clients is just connecting to gratitude in the same way but without using a journal. So one of the tools I always teach people to use is to, in the morning when you wake up, take a piece of paper, write down what you're grateful for this morning, and maybe carry it in your pocket through the day. And if you find yourself getting stressed or lost or whatever, you can pull out that piece of paper and remind yourself what you're grateful for today. And just keep doing that all through the day. And at the end of the day, take that piece of paper, read it one more time, and put it in a box or put it in a drawer or something, and then do the same thing the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And then after 30 days, have this ritual where you pull out all those little sheets of paper, line them up, start reading them, and just what are you doing there? You're counting your blessings. Whew. Look at all the things I was grateful for this month. And it's a beautiful practice to get people into that ritual and habit of doing. So that's a great tool. Another type of journal that I have never done, because I'm afraid if I do I wouldn't like it, is a stream of consciousness journal. And that's just sitting down and getting all the stuff out of your head. Whatever you're thinking, just a stream of consciousness and put it on paper. And yeah, something I might have to practice soon because I convinced myself I shouldn't. But this could be very useful, especially with people who have trouble going to sleep, right? Because most people struggle going to sleep because they have all these stories running through their head, where if they can write it down and get it out of their head, they might be able to sleep better. And also that pre-sleep journaling can be very useful for people who feel like they're super busy every day. All the things on their to-do list for the tomorrow. If they write down their to-do list for tomorrow, it gets it out of their head and they stop thinking about it. Not every time, but some of the time. So that can be a great journal as well. So,